Good morning, folks. I know you're joining us right now, and in a couple of minutes, we'll get going. Just going to wait for everybody to log in. Okay, we're at 11 o'clock, so we're going to get going. My name is David Bloodgood. I'm Risk Management Coordinator for NYMER's Risk Management Department. And today, Karen Buckley, Vice President of Member Services and Marketing, is going to be walking you through this cyber presentation. It has very direct information about what you yourself can do to make sure that your network is protected by the most frequent cause of breaches, which is human error. And we'll go over that in particular, but other sources of breach as well. Now, we're going to also kind of switch back and forth. I'll be interjecting every once in a while. Karen may ask me to comment on things, or I'll put in my 2 cents. But there is also a Q&A function and a chat. Use the Q&A, and I will be typing out answers to your questions as we can. At the end of the presentation, Karen and I have our contact information up. So if we don't get to all of your questions, or if there's something that requires a bit more in-depth treatment, then feel free to contact us afterwards, and we'll do our best to get your questions answered. So Karen, why don't you get started? And okay.
All right, thanks, David, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for joining us. We hope to be done by noon, but we do have a lot of information for you today, and I know that it's close to lunchtime, so we'll do our best to get through it as quickly as possible. Cyber's always been such an important topic, but unfortunately, concerns grow even more when there's any kind of trauma or political issues or political events going on, and boy, we do have them all right now. So these cyber criminals have no morals, and they prey on human weaknesses and vulnerabilities during these crisis events. So it's more important than ever, if that's even possible, to be a human firewall. You hear about firewalls in cyber, and we're here to give you as much information, as many examples as possible, along with some outside information. So we always say, well, why local governments? You have a lot of responsibilities. They love to prey on local governments and public entities because residents just don't move away because they're not happy with the local government. These days they do, but it's not so easy. Cyber terrorists may focus on local governments and public entities because they can shut you down. They know that you have systems that run water electronically. It can be a politically motivated type attack. You have more private or personal information, personal identifying information than most public sector companies. You have a gamut of it. You may have credit card numbers, and I do hear a lot from municipalities, well, we don't have credit card numbers, but you do have driver's license numbers. You do request a lot of personal information from your residents. So cyber crimes, unfortunately, are here to stay. You're going to hear a lot of different terminology. We're not here to broaden that vocabulary of cyber. It does seem to be getting worse. Right now, some of our guards may be let down due to distractions related to the coronavirus. the bottom line is that we're human and we can be gullible, and attacks continue to work, and they have gained a little more sophistication over time. Cyber exposures and costs. We're trying to talk to you today to be more proactive instead of reactive. I do hear a lot of stories. I've gone to a lot of different conferences and events where a municipality may be talking about how they were attacked and the costs and how they're so much better now, and they have these great systems and they have backup and they have firewalls and they have endpoint protection. But that's not the time to do it afterwards. It's before. So recovery from those incidents are very expensive. Restoring your data can be very expensive. You have to hire forensic experts in these areas. Those are the things that you can't do yourselves. But today, what David and I are here to talk about are things that you can do for yourselves. The downtime, you just can't afford it. And David, did I leave anything out so far? I want to make sure that I go back to you here and again.
No, because we'll be treating some of this stuff more in depth in a few slides too.
Okay, all right. So like I said, I'm not here to broaden your vocabulary because I think that cyber can have its own dictionary at this point. And like I said, those terminologies are not important. However, what we're going to talk about and some of the things that we're going to give you information on are more important than that. So a data breach means that some of the private information got out, private information that might identify a person, and they may be able to hack into an account and wreak havoc on an account. Infrastructure damage to public utilities or your internet connections can be very volatile for a municipality. We have a lot of examples about that as well. We will talk about utilities and some utilities that were hit at some municipalities at some point over time. Funds transfer fraud, we'll talk a little bit about that as well today. And those are types of cyber events that do happen as well. And we have had them happen to our municipalities. So we do have real life examples of those as well. So any computer incident we're talking about today. Credential harvesting is something that you may have heard about, and understanding the definition is not so important, but basically it's that these cyber hackers or cyber thieves or bad actors, whatever you might want to call them, take pieces of information that they may have gathered from one website that they hacked into, and then they keep it and hold on to it until they could put that piece together. Or they may sell it on the dark web. It's a marketplace for your information, for whether it be usernames, passwords, those kinds of identifying credentials where they can use them later. And they have a lot of time because unfortunately, this is their full-time job. They can do it from home. They can do it in their pajamas if they want to. So you can't be safe enough with passwords and with making sure that your systems are protected appropriately. So like I said, it's an attack on one account, and you can get lists and lists and lists of usernames, email addresses, and then they use it in conjunction with something else. How are we doing so far, David? Do you have anything to add?
No, just that these attacks are becoming more sophisticated, and if it hasn't come your way, I'm sure that everybody has experienced some form of sketchy stuff, whether it's in their personal accounts or whatever. But recognizing it as the first step and realizing that it's becoming a more serious problem, as Karen's talking about here.
So strong passwords are important, and you're going to hear me say that a lot, and you're going to probably get tired of hearing me talk about strong passwords, but then we can start here. We talk about that at the end, but that's why strong passwords are important, because of what we're talking about right now, the credential harvesting and changing your passwords and not using the same password across many different websites. You can find out if your personal information is on the dark web. And like I said, if I go too fast and some of these websites that I give you that can be helpful today, you're not writing them down or forgot your pen, we will share this with you, and our contact information will be at the end for you as well, so that you can get all of these different websites that we will be sharing with you. So different types of causes of this: stolen laptops, computers, flash drives. Some people still have flash drives or other types of computer storage devices. Employee error, which is the highest amount of how data breaches and ransomware happen. Even if you dispose of used computer devices in a dumpster or improperly or don't have them wiped clean, that is, people do dumpster dive for those types of things, or leaving them out in the open in your car to be stolen. They know that there's information on those that can be useful for them. So don't do that. Backup tapes lost or misplaced. Hackers, rogue employees. And rogue employees, you think that, well, they don't have access to systems, but a lot of people don't have good offboarding procedures. So making sure that when an employee leaves, even before that employee leaves, that everything is discarded, is terminated for that employee, especially if they have any kind of administrative rights to any kind of computer systems or administrative rights to water systems or anything like that. And obviously internal security type failures is one as well.
One thing I'll mention very quickly is that amongst all of those different kinds of computer equipment, copiers have a memory in them. And so you don't want to just throw them in the garbage either, because we all know that you think you're copying something and it's okay, you made a copy and you have that and you're controlling it, but it's also maybe stored internally within the copier.
Right, and I have to say, I was out at a municipality, a very small municipality, and we were talking a little bit about cyber, and this was several years ago. And they told me that they got a phone call from somebody who asked for their ID number off of their copier. They had no idea why. They weren't from the copy machine. So I'm not sure if that's a piece of information that can actually get placed and can take away that those scanned copies with personal information on them. I wasn't sure, but so David brings up a great point. They're computerized too. They can be hacked into as well. Some data breach causes here are failure to encrypt data, which hopefully your IT person has under control for you, or your software that you install in computers takes care of. Lack of multi-factor authentication, we'll talk more about that. I actually have a website to help you install multi-factor authentication. A lot of times that's free, so there's no reason not to have it. And the human factor, the social engineering campaigns, that's basically an attack method that uses a delivery tool like email, a web page, a fake web page to target your sensitive information or perform an action that enables an attacker to compromise your system or to get into your personal information. And it uses psychological manipulation. And right now, we're all very vulnerable to that because of what's going on. They use whatever's going on across the world to get into your brain. There's creation of fake accounts on social media platforms. There are just so many of them out there, and we'll go over some of the most recent ones now. So the creation, I just went over this. Whaling is also a type of phishing attack where somebody masquerades to be an executive and may give you a directive, whether it's to move funds or to transfer funds. So like we talked about funds transfer fraud, or even sending you an email and it looks like it's from that executive, but it's just one letter, one number, one character off. And I think David has a great example of a very recent transfer fraud from a town that you talked to. David, did you want to? Okay.
Sure. You know, a lot of times when they're trying to do something like this, trying to manipulate you, they put pressure and time pressure on you. And so often these things happen on a Friday afternoon, and it's like, you got to hurry up and get this done. It appears to be coming from a town official asking to do something. And in this particular case, it was an employee who said, I just changed my bank account, and so we need to change the direct deposit for my payroll. And that email looked utterly legit. And so the clerk and the bookkeeper were both, you know, it was convincing enough that they both made that change. And down the road, the employee said, I never got my pay. It was diverted into a fake account. So, you know, these are the kind of things you really need to watch out for. They are happening out there.
Thanks, David. And I think one of the most important things that I heard David say was time. Usually these types of phishing expeditions or social engineering type attacks do tell you that you've got to get this done now. It's time sensitive. So they're depending on this time sensitive issue for you to click on whatever it is they're asking you to click on, or to take the instructions that were in the email. So I don't know. I just would be more careful. I would pick up the phone. Recently, I heard of another example where somebody ran into somebody in the hall and said, hey, I'm taking care of that, or whatever you just told me to do. And then they were like, what are you talking about? So it was a whaling type, a targeted phishing attack where somebody was masquerading as somebody else that had the authority to make that directive. So had they not seen each other in the hall, and these days with us working remotely, it's going to have to be a phone call to be careful. So we did talk about the credential stuffing attack, and this was the example that David used. And don't forget, these types of things work well against people who use the same password for lots of different sites and weak passwords. And I can tell you that we did have a ransomware attack, which we're going to talk about ransomware next. And it was as a result of a weak password. It was the town's name and 2019. So I'm sure the town changed that to the town's name and 2020 now, but hopefully they learned their lesson, and that's really not the case. So I think we've all heard about ransomware. We've all read about ransomware, and we've definitely read about some of those attacks that have destroyed a whole municipality's file and functions for days, weeks, months on end. So sometimes they'll use shaming tactics, especially for local governments. If you don't pay us the ransomware, we'll release the personal information that we have. And you as local governments do have a lot of legal responsibilities to protect the information and that sensitive material that you have. And we do recommend that you don't pay the ransomware. So you don't want to come into the office one day, and you certainly don't want to see this picture, because then you hopefully you will know what to do. You will have a plan in place, but we hope that you don't get here. So some of the latest in the news, and I'm sure it's more than 40. I haven't updated this slide in a little while, but City of Albany is the closest to home here. And they spent $295,000 just to upgrade their systems. That's not counting the cost that it took them to have experts come in, to have forensics come in. Number one, make sure that the malware is still not in there. Make sure it's 100% gone. Recreate any data and restore any systems that were lost as a result of the ransomware. And it just goes on about how the city or any municipality can catch up after they're down for a while. Email shutdown, water bill. So how would you like to get your water bill after 7, 8, 9, 10 months of them being shut down and having it all in one? I know a lot of people pay them differently, but I know there are examples in Baltimore. People were used to getting their bill every month, and then they got an 8-month bill for their water bill. Health alerts are gone. Everything was locked down. 5.3 million spent on computers and contractors to help them get back up and running.
In this case, I'll just be, you notice how it says the demand was $100,000, but often the cost of forensics and correction exceeds the amount that they're asking for ransom by a long, long ways. So you're not just up against the ransom, you're up against significantly higher costs.
And that's true, and it's unfortunate because it's cheaper to pay the ransomware. And sometimes the unfortunate thing is when you do pay the ransomware, you don't necessarily get everything back, and things aren't back up and running 100%. And then also you don't know that malware or whatever that infection is still there. You still have to hire forensics. You still have other responsibilities. What information did they acquire? Did they download some of your information and keep it? So you just don't know. And we don't, NICOM, the Association of Towns and the Association of Counties, does not recommend paying the ransomware. You're just really enabling them. So we'll skip over a couple of other examples that I have. Oops, sorry. So yeah, so this was a library as part of the municipality. They were all tied into one server. And I don't know if any of you remember the old-fashioned library card, but that's the way they checked a book out. You went to the back, you wrote the due date on the book. My understanding is that law enforcement was writing out tickets manually. They were writing the meters out manually, and they asked the supervisor or the town officials for some information, and they had to send them a handwritten note. So not a good situation. Not sure why that screen is blank. Okay, so how does it happen? I think we talked a lot about the different ways that it can happen. It's a phishing attack. Did they not have complex passwords? Did somebody click on a picture, a video clip, a coupon from a website? Or did they just visit an infected website? And it does happen within 2 to 3 minutes. And honestly, I think it can happen a lot quicker than that. And basically, it's because we just didn't have a human firewall, or we didn't have the appropriate protection for our computers. If you do ever notice something, a specialist told me one time, yeah, if you happen to you have the luxury of sitting right in front of the screen while it's happening, try to pull the plug, because if it's one computer, it just ends up infecting the whole entire system. So maybe you can stop it, but I don't know that that's the end all. So like I said, turn off the computer. There are lots of different places that you should report it once that you are able to find out that you actually were breached. You can contact NIMR if you have cyber coverage. You have to have some kind of a response plan in place. I'm wondering if everybody's sitting here today listening, do you all know what you would do if you found out that you actually did have a ransomware? If you did see a screen, your computer's locked, you need to pay this. Or if you did notice all of a sudden your computer just went haywire and had a lot of gibberish on it, hopefully you would know what to do. NIMR does have a cyber handbook where we give you maybe a template of some kind of an incident response plan, but there's not a one-size-fits-all. Also, the SHIELD Act, which is Stop Hacks and Improve Electronic Data. That is a responsibility by law that you have to notify and to protect. You're supposed to have some kind of a plan in place with the SHIELD Act. The SHIELD Act did recently change as well, where an unauthorized person had to actually download a copy of information or take possession of it in order for you to have certain requirements to notify. But now it's just the unauthorized access. So once you know your systems have been somehow compromised, you have responsibilities under the SHIELD Act, and you should have some kind of a plan in place, and you should also have in writing, what do we do? How do we notify our residents we were breached and that their information may have been breached? So we talked about removing any of the malware, getting your files back up and running, and let's hope determining lessons learned, and what could we have done better. So this CISA is another place you can report them, and by reporting them, you're just sharing information, because the way you were hacked might have not been the way the person was hacked at the city of Albany the last time they were hacked. So sharing that information, and this CISA website also, I subscribe to them. They do send out alerts all the time. They have a lot of free best practices information. I think it's probably one of my favorites because it can be more in layman's terms, and obviously it is more focused for public entities. So hopefully you can take that down today or get it later when we share the presentation with you. Don't click on unrecognized links, and if you're not sure of a link, copy and paste the link into a browser. And I know, David, you talked a little bit more about hovering over a URL to see if it's different than what you think it is. So I'm going to let you talk about that.
Well, yeah, that is a very common way and it's very, very quick and easy. You just take your cursor and you hover over the link that's being shown and seeing if the reflection of it, which appears above it, is identical. If it's not, it's suspect. So that's something you have to watch out for. You know, one thing, we're talking in general terms about what happens with your municipality, but I'm sure that a thought has crossed all of your minds, and if it hasn't, it should. Nobody wants to be that employee that caused this to happen. I mean, you'd really break into a sweat if you found yourself in that situation. So, you know I certainly would.
I think most of us feel that way. So yeah, sometimes you'll see that there are red or green little locks on safe websites, and I can assure you NYMER is a safe one, so you can look for a green or a red flag. Phishing attacks are the most common, like we said, and you're going to get tired of hearing me saying that, but here are some other examples. So surveys, congratulations, you've been selected to take this survey and you'll win how much money after you take it, but you have to take it within the next 5 minutes or next minute. Social media, clicking on links in social media. So this is a lot of good examples. The email has a sense of urgency. I talked about that as well. We did get notified from one of our municipalities, probably one or two, we got phone calls from, getting an email from the help desk, and they want employees to click on the link to provide updated email and account information for the payroll department. Well, payday's on Friday, and I got this Thursday at 4:45, and I'm sorry, but I want my paycheck, so I might just click on there and update my information to make sure that paycheck is where it needs to be on Friday. So thankfully, some very sharp individuals, and nobody's saying that people who aren't intelligent can't get hacked. The FBI's been hacked. The federal government's been hacked. I read about cyber companies being hacked. So it can happen to anybody.
Also, the attacks can come from kind of in an indirect way. We probably all remember one of the first really big attacks was that on Target, and how it affected a lot of people that had accounts with Target. And the way that the hackers got in was they identified a contractor that was working with Target, that they had access to Target's database. And so they went through the vendors, the contractors' website and their network, and then made their way into Target because that vendor was not exercising best practices and making sure that everything was secure. So they were able to enter a back door of Target's via this vendor. So it's another thing you need to be aware of, is when somebody is authorized to gain access to your network for legitimate purposes, you would want to, and Karen can talk about this more specifically, or you can ask us questions afterwards, make sure that whatever contract you're signing with that vendor has some kind of protections, hold harmless, that they are going to defend you, that they have insurance and stuff like that, because you don't know that they're exercising the kind of caution that you are.
Thanks, David. Great points. And to bring it to today, COVID-19, there have been so many different types of malicious type emails, and they look like they're from these trusted sources. A recent U.S. CARES Relief Act, attackers impersonated the U.S. Department of Revenue, which is an inaccurate name for the U.S. Tax Authority, and they were encouraging users to fill out a secure document. And what it does is it takes you to a document and your Microsoft credentials are stolen. So be careful. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there, maybe not as much now as there was in the beginning of the pandemic. We're working from home. We're very distracted. I know there are a lot of distractions when you're working from home. We want to know what's going on out there. So just be careful about what you're clicking on. So don't take the bait. I don't want to, I see we're at 11:30 and we're not halfway through our slides. So here's a little information that I got from a statistical website, and this is from 2018. So some of those have gone up. So at the end of 2019, December of 2019, this spam phishing is up to 67%. The weak passwords is up to 30%. It's only 2% up. And lack of cybersecurity training is up to 36%. I bet you if I had third quarter, if I was lucky enough to have third quarter statistics for you today, these are through the roof. And as you can see, these types of issues that we're talking about are all human factors. So training users on how to spot email and phishing, and that's what we're trying to do today. And we do have some training on the NYMER Online University. I can't believe how much this actually looks like an L, and it's a 1. Phishing training, I know that a lot of different companies do it. I don't know if our municipalities are doing it, but there's a lot of value to phishing training because it's not trying to make a fool out of anybody. It's just trying to make us more aware. And it's a good thing when somebody gets caught because not caught, but when somebody can have another example to use for a learning tool. So another phishing email that we got at our company was they wanted to update our code of conduct and our expense policy. And I travel a lot and I have to get reimbursed for a lot of my expenses. And I can tell you that I'm going to fill this out because, I want to make sure I get paid and I get reimbursed. But there was something that looked a little fishy about it, no pun intended. And then before I knew it, Brown & Brown was sending an email out letting us know that this, in fact, was not true. And if you had already clicked on it, they told us what to do. So be careful. Another example is here, but also it's the same one, sorry. So we have a protocol in place. They tell us, if you get a mail, this is what you do. So you don't need to see everything that we say here. This example will be in the presentation if you want it. And there's got to be something that we know to do. And one time I did contact IT and say, hey, do you know if this is real? They said, well, why don't you just call the municipality and see? So they weren't even sure. So it doesn't hurt to pick up the phone. And going back to the COVID, different issues that are happening now, a lot of people are getting their groceries and are ordering online. Instacart is a very popular vendor with markets. They were breached twice. I know I use Instacart. Sam's Club has been recently breached. And David and I were talking about Netflix this morning. Who's not watching more TV? My Netflix sent me, update your account information now. or we're going to block you out of Netflix. And hey, if I'm in the middle of a good series and I want to see that show tonight, I may just go in and update my information. So some examples here: the from line of the email appears to be from a different state than the recipient, yet claims to be from a local municipality. So dead giveaway. So you have to kind of have your eagle eye out there. The from line of the email is from a domain indicative of a school district, but yet it's claiming to be from a local municipality. The to line shows the recipient's full email address rather than the name, which indicates the email, but may be from the outside of the network. Date and stamp are outside of typical business hours. Have you ever seen dear customer or dear customers? It doesn't personally address you. And then this is what David was talking about, hovering the mouse over the link, and you'll see that it's really not that true website that you thought it was from. So you can also copy and paste it into a browser to test it. It only takes 3 seconds from the link click, and I'm sure it's a little less than that. Poor spelling and grammar, I think people, you don't see those as much anymore, but I think I saw one not too long ago. I did talk about dear customer or dear member instead of saying, actually putting your name. Intimidation tactics are very common. And like I said, don't hesitate to call whoever it is it's coming from if something just doesn't seem right. Go with your gut. If it seems good to be true, yeah, most likely it is. So I think we talked about the payroll, so I won't go over that again. Here's some more federal authorities that you can send spam emails to. We talked a lot about infrastructure, water systems. Electronic water systems are more common, and smart buildings are more common. There was a huge attack on water systems infrastructure. Don't forget, somebody hacks in, you can have a flood. You can have contaminated water. So talking about those administrative privileges, especially when you have an employee leave, or thinking about who gets administrative privileges on certain systems or inner workings at your municipality, is very, very important for you to consider. Websites, we have seen, I did have a risk manager that sat next to me at one time, and he was going out to a municipality, and he just went on their website before he went out, and there was porn all over it. So if you do have a website, take a look at it every once in a while just to make sure that it's up and running, and what you feel you want on it is there is important. Don't need your 911 center down. Anybody hacks into a police department. I actually heard about dates being changed at a jail, for release dates of inmates were changed, were fudged, and when somebody hacked into a system. So some pretty big stuff that can happen. David, do you have anything to add on that?
With respect to the 911 centers, that is something that has happened multiple times where, and it's called a denial of service attack, where they compromise a network and nobody can get through to a vital function. And it puts pressure on the municipality, certainly, if they can't respond to 911 calls and such to comply with whatever the demand is being made. So you can see that, infiltrating a system like water or sewer and causing backups or interrupting 911 communications can be a powerful motivator to act quickly rather than rationally. And, why Karen and I are talking about all this again is to get ahead of all of that so you don't find yourself in that situation.
Thank you. Okay, so what's at risk? And we'll go through this pretty quick. So New York State is required under the New York State technology law to have a notification policy in place. We do have a sample for you if you'd like to use that sample. The SHIELD Act does require you to have this technology law in place. And this year, as I said, some of the changes expanded the definition of private information as well. There were a lot of changes, and it just made it more onerous on your responsibilities It can be emails, passwords, credit card details, biometric data, security questions, among others. You know, those security questions that you have to create when you are signing up for a new website, those can be hacked too. I took a webinar the other day, and it was funny that because of social media and because we put ourselves out there so much, those questions are so easy for people to hack. So just be careful about what kinds of questions and answers you're creating. And I just went over this. I talked about the combination with any required security code, access code, or password, which would permit access to an individual's online account. So it doesn't have to be the whole piece of the puzzle. It can just be a little piece. And you are on the hook to notify and to protect that information. Part of that SHIELD Act is you do have to notify, like I said. And like I said, we do have a sample policy. You have to make sure they know who to notify and who are they contacting at your municipality if there is a breach, if you do notify them. And like I said, the information just has to be reasonably believed to be accessed, not acquired, not necessarily downloaded.
And you can imagine why that might be. Like, somebody can pull up personally identifiable information and not download it, but still access. What if it was your social security number? So that has ramifications for identity theft and other, credit information, obviously.
Right, and that reminds me too, is that, you think a piece of that information may not be important, but you'd be surprised of how many stories are out there where the people that are trying to penetrate a system are in the system already, and they just sit there, and sometimes it's 2 months, sometimes it's a year, until the right time when they just get that other crucial piece of information or that other piece of the puzzle, and then they attack. So public relations, if you do have an attack, engaging a professional public relations team could be very important, because your reputation is at stake. How could a municipality let that happen? And NYMER does have some crisis risk services that we do offer for free. So if you don't have that information, you can get it from David or I. We're happy to give that to you. It is a free service. Education, we talked about that. If you have a municipality, a municipal website, adopting a .gov address helps reduce the risk of fraudulent websites. An IT professional can do vulnerability testing. Having a policy and good cyber hygiene, making that a priority. So that's just your training, having strong passwords. So we just talked about that. So sorry about that. So you'd be amazed how many people would give up their passwords to strangers who ask them for it. Unfortunately, we tried to play this morning and it wasn't loud enough, but Jimmy Kimmel's pretty funny, but this is somebody he puts on the street interviewing different people, and it is pretty funny how people just give up their information. It's mind-boggling. You can also check at least once a month on Have I Been Pawned? There's a website there to check to see if your password's been pawned, and also you can go in and you can see that you can be notified. There's a spot to click on to say notify me if this particular password has ever been breached. So this is a result from a study on 10 million passwords that have been breached in recent years. So here are what some weak passwords include: words, names, verbs, colors, animals, fruits, love phrases, superheroes, days of the week. If you've never heard elite speak, you see in 2 examples here. It looks like a word, but they use numbers in place of the letters. So you see, most importantly, don't use patterns on your keyboard. They're at the top of the list of broken passwords. Easily broken passwords that fit the above criteria were broken by password crackers in anywhere from 10 to 32 seconds. And here are some examples of the passwords. That's the elite speak, that's seashell, broken in 15.6 seconds. So password crackers can test up to 300,000 passwords per second. That's a lot. They just have programs that they run. They don't have to do a thing. They click a button. And if you can see here, here's a strong password, and that took 4 days. And then this one here would take centuries. So who really can create passwords like that? David, do you want to talk about password managers at all?
Well, I don't use one for work, and I did talk to our IT department, and they said that some of them are pretty good, but you would want to certainly consult with your IT vendor if you were to do this. But I use a password protector for my home accounts, and basically you have a it's called LastPass in this case, but there are other ones, and you have a really complicated password to get into that, but then it houses all the passwords that you have for your various accounts, like banking accounts and all that sort of thing. And every time you log into that, it generates a new random password every time you go in. So, it eliminates the need to perhaps be changing your password so frequently. As I said, I don't use it for work. I do use it for my home, and I'm pretty confident in it, but I don't use it for work because I haven't gotten an official blessing. And I think that that's a wise thing to do if you are going to be, using a work network.
Yeah, password managers, you figure you only need to remember one password to get into it. The average person has to log into about 170 different sites or programs, not per day, but they have access. And the average person has only 3 to 19 passwords. So those are some statistics for you that I found pretty interesting. And a big no-no is using the same password across many different sites. And especially at your municipality, you shouldn't be using the same password that you use on your Macy's account or your Amazon account, because basically what that means is once they get that at the municipality, they're into those accounts and vice versa. So you want to protect yourself personally, and you want to protect the municipality as well. So the average password is about 8 characters. And if you want to create a strong one, it should be at least 10 characters long. I always think longer, but maybe a phrase that you can remember is a little bit better. Avoiding patterns. Don't just add a number or two at the end. They're busted pretty easily. Mix upper and lowercase letters, mix in numbers, use special characters. And here's examples of special characters. And if you follow these recommendations, you're in the top 1% of the most secure passwords. So not asking too much. And here are some password strength check sites. And I found this interesting too. Any website asking you to submit your real password to determine strength could be using your submission against your interests. So when you are going in, use something similar but not identical, just in case. So even these sites, you have to be careful on. Who knows? Somebody can also hack those. But like I said, I'll leave it here for a second, but you're welcome to follow up with us. I think what we're going to do is just send a presentation out to everybody to make it easy. So multi-factor authentication, it's that second way to get into a site. You sign in with your password, and then you may get a text that says, is this you? Or a text with an additional code to put in. So you have to kind of have your phone with you. Could be a fingerprint, could be, I think they can scan your eye now, retina scanning. So lots of different ways. And recently we did send something out about multi-factor authentication. NYMER sent out a bulletin. There's no excuse not to have it. It's really easy to implement. Most of them are free. I don't think unless you have something old, you might have to purchase hardware, but here's a great website for you to go on. There's a video too, so it can walk you through every step. Oops. So yeah, prohibit connecting to unsecured. So that free airport site or coffee shops, those free sites, I wouldn't be doing any personal business or municipal business on those. Some signs could be that you have malware or an infection, a slow computer, excessive pop-ups. I don't think that happens as much anymore. You try to search for something and some weird searches come up, nothing that you've tried to search for it comes up at all. And if your home page is changed, you might want to wonder why if you didn't change it. So reduce your risk. You can have your information in the cloud. That's something that you have to buy. You should have backup, and you should test your backup, because what's the sense in having backup if it doesn't work? I have a good example of a municipality found that they were tired of backing up their information. It was a little tedious, and I think there are easier methods of backing up today. They assumed there'd be little to no need to update every single day, but unfortunately, its system crashed in the middle of tax season. And the tax collector, when she asked for the backup to the system, found that the last backup was made before tax season, meaning that all the information on who paid their taxes that year had been lost. So verifying that your backup is working might be a really good idea. And having backup can really help you get back up and running a lot sooner. Obviously, old information only has to be backed up once and put away in a safe spot. David, we had information on the 3-2-1 philosophy of backing up. Do you still have that?
It's in the notes. Let's see.
Okay, I can.
Yeah, it's 3 backups. Yep, it's 3 copies of essential files on 2 different types of media, and maintain at least one of those offsite, one of those backups offsite. Even if it's in a vault or something, you want to make sure that you're covered every which way.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't find my notes on that. And actually, the NYMER's cyber handbook does have information on backup, has information on testing backup, a lot of good information in our cyber handbook. So please don't hesitate to reach out for that. Do you have the Norton antivirus? These are all these endpoint malware firewalls are all things that you can purchase. They really are not that expensive. So yeah, why test? Why back up and why test it? Make sure you know what you're backing up. Make sure it's everything that you need. So those daily types of data that are being recreated. Good example was during your tax information, and then the 3-2-1 David talked about, and backing up each operating system.
Also, if you're working with an IT vendor, don't assume that they are testing things like your backup. It may, unless it's specifically spelled out in the scope of your agreement, ask them about it. It is that important, and you don't want to leave it to chance.
Yeah, David and I were talking about that recently, about backup and testing backup. And if you do have an IT vendor, NYMER does recommend that you have some kind of an agreement in place if you do have an IT vendor. And I'll call it a service level agreement. What are you giving me? What are you guaranteeing me? That you're the IT vendor expert. I'm paying you. So what is it that you're doing for me? Now, if they're doing your backup for you, why wouldn't they be testing your backup? Why wouldn't they want to make sure it's working? Because having backup that doesn't work, there's no sense in having backup. And I think that's just common sense. So hopefully your IT vendor is testing your backup and letting you know, yep, it's working. We're in good shape if something happens. Having a computer use policy and a social media policy is important. That computer use policy should be signed off by all employees, and they should understand what their responsibilities are when they're using your computers. Restricting access to sites that may not be business related. I know that for employees that think this is mean, there's a good reason for it. We did have a municipality have a cell phone issued by the town, and they were ordering something from Amazon. I don't know, maybe it was work related, but they clicked on something within Amazon or the Amazon link itself, and it infected not only the phone, but that was a municipal issued phone that was connected to the main server. So an infection, some kind of infection, malware was in the entire system. So there are reasons why we recommend that certain policies be followed, and also consequences if it isn't followed. If you have public access to computers, this should be separate. So if you do have public access, I don't think a lot of our members do have that. Employees should have limited use policy, and I just talked about the phone. So having a cell phone use policy as well. And if they are using their personal phones for municipal business, hopefully it's just for a phone call here and there, but not accessing email systems or other systems via their phone, or they should probably sign off on a policy. And that's a tough fine line when somebody's got their personal phone using to access municipal systems.
Karen, if I could just interject, I think we all understand how addictive to a lot of people are to Facebook, for instance. Facebook has a broad reach, and people are really, very devoted to it. And if they're sitting at their desk and they don't have a lot to do, the temptation to go online and check your Facebook account could be, and all of a sudden it's somebody's birthday. So you want to send them a little birthday wish or whatever. And I'll tell you that personally, I had on my home computer, I sent a birthday wish to somebody. And the next day I had something in Messenger from them saying, hey, I found this old video of you or this old picture of you. And so, it was like, wow, okay. So I clicked on it, and it ended up being a fake thing. And it forwarded the same notification to all of my Facebook friends. So if you're doing that at work, you don't want to get tripped up and have a bad outcome for something like that. So that the limited use policy, believe me, there are people at work accessing Facebook and can easily, incur the same sort of experience.
Or just don't let them use their cell phones for municipal business if you're able to do that. Yeah, the policy is pretty important. I know since the pandemic, I was never a big cell phone user. I get that notification, your screen time is up. I think everybody's screen time is up, whether it's connecting with people who we haven't seen, with loved ones we haven't seen, or just trying to find out what's going on today with the world, with the politics, with the Black Lives Matter. There's so many things going on in our environment, and it just makes all of us so much more vulnerable. And we're on those social media platforms. So just please be careful. So having a response plan, I know now there's a new requirement by the government to have a policy in place for an emergency, for a medical emergencies. So that's something that has to be in place by municipalities, I believe, by April of 2021. But the SHIELD Act does require you to have some kind of an incident response plan in place. And preparing for the absolute worst is probably the best thing that you can do. So whether it's identifying who we're going to call, I have done training in person where I asked, does everybody know who to call? And they're all pointing to their IT person. So that's great. I hope that they know the phone number, or they know how to get a hold of that IT person, because most of the time we use, the internet or an email. And let's make sure that policy is updated. What if that IT person leaves? They retired, or they went on to bigger and better things. Make sure it's updated. Make sure that new person's on there. Am I calling my insurance company? So anybody who's participating when there is a cyber event, do they really know what they have to do in the case of this event? And do we need to call? Do we have a forensics company or an attorney that we call to help us out with some of the infections and getting that out. Test your plan and make sure it's up to date. Lessons learned are always good from an incident response plan, but let's hope you don't have to learn too many lessons and that it's pretty well and up to speed. So a couple of tips that I've seen: turn off the computer if you see something happening, and that's pretty much trying to isolate the computer is by unplugging it. Notify the appropriate personnel and put backup data offline, like we talked about, to secure it, and make sure you're changing all passwords after some kind of a horrible event. Have strong onboarding and offboarding. So offboarding policies are important. Getting that administrative access terminated when somebody's no longer with the municipality. Here are some resources that we have here at NYMER. All of them are on the NYMER Online University. So if you don't have your sign-on access code, we're happy to give that to you. There's cyber training, there's phishing training on there. Like I said, our cyber guide has a lot of information on it with sample policies, sample contract wording for your IT consultant. There's a self-assessment tool in there to see how you're doing on security. We have a bulletin on water security and information about a cyber attack that actually took place, one of the big ones. Like I said, we do have that crisis management counseling that's available for you at no cost, and a sample social media policy as well. Some agencies that you can report, yet some more that I have here that you can report a cyber event to. And the incidents are important for them, for their intelligence, for that intelligence to share and to learn and to be better. Some more of those. The NYMER Online University, here's just some of the cyber training here under cybersecurity on the left side here. There's a lot of different cybersecurity. We try to update that so it's not the same all the time, because we feel it's important for you to train at least once a year just to get you back up to speed. And here's our information. I will leave this up for a minute or two. And David, I want to thank everybody today for taking the time to come. We feel, like I said, this is very, very important. We do have cyber insurance. We insure you, and I can assure you that the cyber insurance is probably not enough money for you to recreate, restore, and make sure that infection is out of your computer if it does happen. So we would like you to mitigate it if possible, and be as cyber secure as you possibly can be. So here's the information, and I'm sure David has something to say before we close as well.
Yeah, by and large, it's really important just to remember that these kind of attacks are on the increase, and they're becoming more sophisticated all the time. So if you haven't run into it, the odds are pretty good. And the best cure is prevention, really. So just exercising, as we kind of under the heading of good cyber hygiene, is just tremendously important.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, I'm going to leave the screen up for a minute or two before I actually end the meeting.